Hello, and welcome to Artists' Books Unshelved. My name is Yuka Petz, and I am in the Cynthia Sears Artist Book Collection to share Dress Code, Strictly Enforced by Tona Wilson, and Desdemona in Her Own Words by Emily Martin. What happens when readers are given control over a character's dialogue? Both of these artist books explore the possibilities of such an intervention and the power it wields. Tona Wilson is a multimedia artist who spent over 2 decades as a Spanish-language interpreter for multiple court systems in New York State. Wilson often waded through long periods of what she describes as legal theater, the recurring routines and well-worn phrases of court that are so predictable they seem scripted. Throughout this period, Wilson kept a sketchbook, sometimes drawing during lulls in court, but more often returning to her sketchbook later to remember and process the events, individuals, and their stories. To protect people's identities in her artwork, she develops amalgams of different people from her sketchbooks, rather than drawing directly from specific individuals. When we open Dress Code Strictly Enforced, we are met with a metal detector and box for keys, familiar to anyone who has walked into a courthouse. Austere signs on the wall stand out against Wilson's delicate swirls of wood paneling, instructing us that we are passive listeners without an active role in this court space. Next, we are following an officer of the court who looks back at us, giving us more instructions. This officer's body, however, has been split into 3 parts: a head, torso, and legs. Turn each of the parts and we meet our next character, a judge who asks for the defendant's plea. The book continues this pattern of spoken words on the left and illustrated portrait on the right, the text and screen-printed images, all divided into 3 parts. When I read a split-page book for the first time, I cannot help but read through the book in sequence, keeping the original bodies together. I am compelled to meet the characters and figure out what is going on. If you read Dress Code Strictly Enforced like this, you get a strong sense of the narrative of court proceedings and the role of different characters in the room. The defendants sometimes speak, but just as often they are being spoken to. We feel the imbalance of power across the dialogue and uniforms, or lack thereof, and how clothing might influence how someone is treated in the courtroom. But in this book, the reader is not a passive spectator in the gallery. Wilson has split each page so we can mix and match each of the 15 characters. We have agency over who is saying what and to whom. The absurdity of the jumbled characters and sound bites reflects Wilson's own responses to the theatrics and prescribed roles of the courtroom. Wilson has also included a pull-out glossary at the end of the book, which contains notes from her own experiences and research. Here we learn more about the specific items and articles of clothing she has given each character, such as the bustle of files spilling out of the arms of the overworked public defender, or the significance of the different colors of prison uniforms. Wilson told me she particularly enjoys the research part of her projects, and the additional context is both fascinating and reinforces her perspective. Change the costume and you can change anyone's role, she writes in the notes at the end of the book. Make the words as absurd as you wish. Emily Martin has been making artists' books for over 40 years. She currently teaches at the University of Iowa Center for the Book while maintaining her own rigorous studio practice. Since 2011, Martin has been working with Shakespeare's tragedies, distilling the themes after careful reading and research of the plays. This artist's book, Desdemona in Her Own Words, began to develop as Martin read the play Othello, with a particular interest in what Martin describes as Desdemona's appalling passivity. Martin excavated all of Desdemona's dialogue from the play and rearranged the individual words to give Desdemona new lines that speak with strength, indicting the other characters for their gross misbehavior in the tragedy. Each of these new lines is printed alongside a figure of Desdemona. Martin, an experienced and experimental printmaker, told me that she used assorted foam and adhesive plates, wire, pressure printing, and collagraphs to print these images. She made a set of 3 wire figures, which would stay fast to a magnet base to be printed. By flipping the wire and printing the other side, Martin was able to print all 7 pages in the book from just 3 wire figures. Martin's exploration of materials and tactile processes influenced much of the development of Desdemona in her own words, and the project got more elaborate as she went. During the early stage of the project, Martin spent a summer cutting and sorting Desdemona's individual words. The breeze in her studio kept blowing the little bits of paper around, though, so Martin printed and stuck the individual words onto magnets so they would stay put while she rearranged them. At the end of this artist's book, we are presented with our own opportunity to manipulate and explore the dialogue Shakespeare wrote for Desdemona. Her words have been separated and attached to magnets in the back of the clamshell box. Like Martin, I am compelled to give Desdemona power in her situation. What would you have her say? Martin's process also led to a short animated video, a sort of companion to the artist's book. While figuring out how to pose Desdemona, Martin created a paper puppet to experiment with different postures for the prints. She later realized that the puppet could be used in other ways and taught herself stop-motion animation. Unlike the artist's book, which features only Desdemona, other characters from Othello appear in the video, but only Desdemona has speaking lines. As she speaks up for herself with these new lines, determined not to be anyone's pawn, the other characters respond in shame and dismay, cowering or hiding from the power of Desdemona's words. By cutting and rearranging characters and lines of dialogue, dress code strictly enforced, and Desdemona, in her own words, makes strong indictments against the power imbalances in life and in fiction. Both books go further still, inviting the reader to bring ourselves into the dialogue and recognize our own power and positions within these narratives.